I should have seen it coming, honestly. Amanda had been slipping out for these late-night meetings for a few weeks now, claiming it was something about work. That might have been believable if she didn't work in human resources. And let's be honest, how many HR emergencies happen at midnight on a Tuesday? The signs were all there, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Was she cheating? That was the obvious assumption. But something about it didn't quite fit. Amanda wasn't one for emotional drama. If she were going to betray me, I always figured she'd do it in a clean, businesslike fashion. And that's exactly what she did. In the strangest, most ridiculous way possible. Amanda had always been ambitious. She wasn't one to sit around and let life pass her by. That's one of the things I liked about her. The problem was, sometimes her ambitions led her down strange, questionable paths. And when Steve from work started coming around more often, I figured she was up to something, but I didn't expect it to be anything serious. Steve? The guy who never finished a sentence without apologizing? I didn't even bother being jealous. I mean, Steve had the personality of a filing cabinet. Of all people, Steve, the guy who wore the same shirt to work 2 days in a row and thought deodorant was optional. He was Amanda's coworker, and for a while, I didn't pay him much attention. If anything, I pitied the guy. He was one of those overly nice, painfully awkward types who apologized before he even finished saying hello. That's why, when Amanda first started talking about him, I thought she was just being kind. Someone like Steve didn't pose a threat. In fact, it felt borderline impossible that Steve could ever seduce anyone. Then there was that one night when Amanda accidentally sent me a text, running late, meeting Steve. And my immediate thought was, really? Steve? It didn't even register as a red flag at first. What could she possibly be doing with him? I shrugged it off until the frequency of these late-night work sessions picked up, and my patience wore thin. So one Sunday afternoon when Amanda told me she'd be gone all day, so like any suspicious partner would do, I decided to check it out. It felt absurd to think that anything serious was going on between her and Steve, but something was up. I drove over to his place around 4 p.m., parked around the corner, and waited. After an hour of sitting there, looking like some kind of idiot in my car, I decided to go knock on the door. Steve answered the door, looking pale, as if he was expecting the Grim Reaper, not me. He looked like he'd just seen a ghost, though that wasn't surprising. Steve always had that deer-in-headlights look, like the world was constantly about to smack him in the face. "Hey man," he stammered. "What are you doing here?" "I don't know, Steve. What am I doing here?" I wasn't in the mood for games. I pushed past him into his apartment, expecting, well, I wasn't sure what. Maybe Amanda in some kind of compromising position, maybe some lingerie thrown across the room. Something typical. But what I found was worse. Sitting on the couch, looking as casual as ever, was Amanda. And she wasn't alone. Sitting next to her was Tom, an old friend from her college days. I hadn't seen him in years, and yet, here he was sitting next to her with a laptop in front of them, both of them looking like they'd just been caught robbing a bank. "What the hell is going on?" I asked, scanning the room. There were no candles, no wine glasses, no clothes strewn about. Just a laptop, Amanda and Tom, staring back at me like kids caught with their hands in the cookie jar. Amanda sighed, running a hand through her hair. "It's not what you think." "It never is," I shot back, feeling the irritation rising. "So what is it, then? You and Steve running a little side gig?" She sighed and rubbed her temples, looking more frustrated than guilty. "It's not an affair, okay? It's a business deal." That made me pause. "Business? You think I'm stupid?" "What, is Steve suddenly a CEO of something I don't know about?" Steve shifted awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Well, actually sort of." I stared at him, trying to process this. Steve, the guy who couldn't string together a coherent sentence, suddenly a mastermind? Not likely. "Steve. You. Running a business. All right. Let me hear this." Amanda took a deep breath, clearly annoyed that she had to explain this to me. "It's not an affair. Well, Steve had this idea. About starting a side hustle. And we needed someone else, Tom, because we needed more, participants." I glanced at Tom, who just raised his eyebrows and shrugged. Participants in what? Amanda hesitated, but then Steve jumped in, clearly tired of being the silent one. We're making videos. Not like those videos, but close. Think erotica, but without all the, explicit stuff. I blinked, still trying to wrap my head around this bizarre explanation. You're kidding, right? You're filming softcore PRN. Steve, suddenly more animated than I'd ever seen him, proud of himself, continued to explain. It's not like hardcore stuff, man. It's more suggestive. Think of it like softcore, amateur erotica. People pay for it, There's a market for everything these days. I stared at Amanda, not sure if I should be impressed or horrified. So you're telling me you're not cheating? You're filming DIY erotica? She nodded, but there was no guilt. Look, I wanted to prove to myself I could still, be desirable. I'm not getting any younger. Plus, Steve and Tom are handling all the technical stuff. I'm just in front of the camera. It's more like teasing. Just suggestive content, nothing explicit. I couldn't decide if I should laugh or get angry. And you're doing this with Tom? Is he your co-star in this little production? Tom, for his part, just shrugged and gave me an awkward grin. It's all pretty harmless, man. Harmless. I repeated, stunned. You're all filming low-budget erotica together. And no one thought to tell me. Look, Amanda said, finally sounding defensive. It's just something I wanted to try. To feel desirable again. And Steve handles the technical stuff. Tom's just helping out, and I'm in front of the camera. But it's not a big deal. Not a big deal. I looked around at the three of them, Steve, Amanda, and Tom, wondering how my life had spiraled into some weird softcore reality show. I wasn't sure whether to be furious or impressed. So this is what betrayal looks like in the 21st century. Not cheating. Oh no, nothing that simple. Instead, my girlfriend was starring in some amateur erotica, produced by the least likely person I knew. Steve. At that point, I wasn't sure if I should laugh or cry. Amanda, of course, sat there, looking more irritated than ashamed, as if I just interrupted some sort of important board meeting instead of an amateur erotica production. And Steve? He was doing his best to blend into the background, his awkwardness practically filling the room. Tom was the only one who seemed unfazed, probably because he'd never been big on thinking things through. The whole situation was so far beyond anything I could have predicted that my brain was struggling to process it. So let me get this straight, I said, mostly to Amanda, since talking to Steve would have felt like addressing a houseplant. You're using Steve's place to film these videos that people pay for. Tom's your co-star? And Steve's what, the cameraman? More like the producer, Steve chimed in, his voice barely above a mumble. It was the first thing he'd said that didn't end with an apology. Apparently, producing softcore erotica gave him confidence. Good for him. I turned to Amanda, ignoring Steve's newfound self-esteem. And you thought it was a good idea to do this behind my back? It's not like that, she replied, brushing off my question with the same nonchalance you might use when explaining why you forgot to take out the trash. I wasn't hiding it from you. I just didn't think you'd understand. Oh, I understand, I said, nodding slowly. You're filming low-budget smut with Steve and Tom because it's more exciting than, normal human relationships. Amanda rolled her eyes, as if I were the one being unreasonable. It's not smut, okay? It's creative expression. People pay for this kind of content. It's harmless. Harmless, I repeated, letting the word hang in the air for a moment. Right. So, how much money have you made from all this harmless creative expression? Amanda shifted uncomfortably on the couch, glancing at Steve as if he was going to bail her out. Steve, of course, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, his confidence quickly evaporating. Tom, ever the picture of cluelessness, raised an eyebrow, waiting for someone else to speak. We haven't exactly made any money yet, Amanda admitted finally. It's a slow start, okay? These things take time. Of course they do, I said, nodding again. Because why wouldn't you risk blowing up your relationship for an unpaid internship in amateur erotica? We're building an audience, Steve mumbled, as if that somehow made it better. You know, creating a brand. Once it picks up, the money will start coming in. I stared at him, wondering how someone could be both that optimistic and that stupid at the same time. So you're telling me you've been filming these videos, putting them out there, and you haven't seen a single cent? Amanda crossed her arms defensively, her annoyance now fully on display. It's not about the money. It's about doing something different, something I'm good at. Acting. I asked, genuinely confused. Being desirable, she shot back, her tone sharpening. It's about reminding myself that I still have something to offer. Ah, there it was. The midlife crisis, neatly wrapped in a web of softcore nonsense. I should have seen it coming from a mile away. Amanda, always the overachiever, wasn't content with the usual get in shape, or by a sports car routine. No, she had to take it to a whole new level. This was classic Amanda, turning insecurity into a full-blown production. And you couldn't do that without dragging Steve and Tom into it? I asked, pointing at them like they were accomplices in some bizarre crime. Hey man, Tom finally spoke up, shrugging. I'm just here to help. It's not like we're doing anything crazy. It's all pretty tame, honestly. I rubbed my temples, trying to process what I was hearing. Tame? So you're telling me you're not even filming anything remotely explicit, and you're still doing this for free? It's a niche market, Steve muttered, clearly tired of defending the ridiculousness of it all. Right. Niche market. No money. And you've been at this how long? Couple of months, Amanda said, her voice tight. Couple of months. I repeated, shaking my head. And not a single dollar. These things take time, Steve mumbled again, like some kind of mantra he'd picked up from one of those get-rich-quick webinars. I was beginning to wonder if Amanda had roped him into this, or if Steve was secretly the mastermind. Neither scenario made me feel better. So, I said, leaning against the wall, let me just recap. You've risked our relationship for a failed business venture, recruited Tom because apparently, there's nothing more attractive than an unemployed guy with zero sense of self-preservation, and Steve, who I'm pretty sure can't even look at a woman without blushing, is the one running the show. And you haven't made a single cent. Amanda stood up, folding her arms across her chest like she was the one who had been wronged. It's not about the money, she repeated. I laughed, a dark, humorless sound that surprised even me. That's good, I said, because you're not getting any. At this point, I should have left. I should have walked out of Steve's apartment, shaken the dust from my shoes, and never looked back. But I didn't. Because despite everything, I had to know just how deep this rabbit hole went. I needed to understand why, out of all the possible midlife crises, Amanda had chosen this particular brand of insanity. So what's the end game? I asked, crossing my arms. You keep filming these creative videos until what? Until you're famous? Until the cash starts rolling in? What's the plan? Amanda shrugged, as if the answer was obvious. We'll figure it out as we go. There's potential here. Potential. That word again. I glanced at Steve, who was nodding like he was on board with this ridiculous plan, and then at Tom, who looked like he couldn't care less either way. This was it. This was their big idea. You do realize that if you wanted to feel desirable, I said, you could have just talked to me, right? Amanda sighed like I was the one being unreasonable. It's not that simple. I needed to do something for myself. Right, I said. For yourself. Got it. At that point, I was done. There was nothing left to say. I'd come here expecting to find Amanda in some cliched affair, and instead, I'd stumbled into something far worse. Infidelity I could have understood. Hell, I might have even forgiven it. But this? This was something else entirely. Amanda hadn't just betrayed me. She turned our relationship into a sideshow, with Steve and Tom as the supporting cast. Good luck with your side project, I said, walking out the door. Let me know when you make your first dollar. And as I left, I realized that this wasn't just about Amanda's midlife crisis. This was about all of us, how we search for meaning in the strangest places and end up losing everything that actually mattered in the process.